Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. So Victor and Tuboson decided to give me a very difficult job to moderate the panel with my boss. Good afternoon, Mr. Deputy Governor. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being part of this panel today. Our discussion today is really to address the issues around getting venture capital for private businesses in Lagos. So we recognize that in Africa, there's been a lot of investment in Africa, but barely 20% of that is local investment. That therefore means that when there's an exit, the capital leaves the continent again. So we have some examples, however, of local businesses that have raised local capital and have been able to, the market has been able to benefit from that local investment. Discussing this with me today, we want to address issues around policy, government regulation. We want to address the challenges for investors, and we want to talk about experiences that can help us highlight the issues that we need to be solving as startups to be able to access funding. Because the truth, as Yoruba will say, owo ni koko. So please let me start today, and I would start from my far left. Mr. Oyenai, can you please share with us your experience in the market and what you feel can really help with what you think the challenges are for startups to able to raise local capital?
Thanks, Teju. So I think that there are different challenges for a lot of startups in raising capital in Nigeria in particular. But I would like to also say that if you look across the last 10 years, we've made a lot of progress from where we started from. When data started to actively be collected from 2015, I believe you will see that we've gone from an average of about, across Africa, maybe an average of about $200 million raised across the continent to last year, when to 2019, where there was a record over $1 billion raised, almost about $1.8 billion, and to last year, which was the year we actually had the first dip in raise that came to about $1.4 billion. And if you look at 2021 alone, it's already projected to beat last year or 2019 of close to $2 billion raised across the continent, and Nigeria is leading that pack. Yeah. But having said that, when you look at from 2008 and now, when really the ecosystem started to shape up, a lot of people are hearing about fintech today, but the journey started from when you have e-commerce companies literally starting out and raising capital, the likes of Jumia, Konga. But if you project to 7 years before then, you had the likes of InterSwitch that built the payment platform in Nigeria that supports a lot of banks. So we can't, when we talk about challenges, I don't want us to look at the challenges of now, because there are some that are almost legacy challenges. And I'll highlight 3 of them. And these are 3 things that for us, as we look at early stage companies that we're looking to cut checks for, whether at pre-seed, seed, or Series A, or even debt, when you look at the local context and compare it to the rest of the world, and you're looking at DEX, there are 3 factors that I always say that you have to discount. And those 3 factors are also the challenges. Number 1 is what I like to call, what we discount in-house as the culture discount. And so when I see a deck that is trying to replicate a product or a service that is very popular in the US market, for instance, and they want to literally copy and paste in the Nigerian market, and these are 2 separate markets. Let's give 2 classic examples of what happened in the e-commerce period. You know, people wanted to ensure that shopping online was easy, but when they were bringing that model to Nigeria, they didn't factor in infrastructure, didn't factor in delivery service, didn't factor in card payment system, didn't factor in the issue of trust, didn't factor in the fact that Nigerians like to see something before they pay for it. So we created a new problem, which was a problem of paying on delivery. So people will say, I'll order it online, but I will pay when I see the product. That created a new challenge. So all of those is a cultural challenge that we hardly factor in, and every investor local or international, we need to factor that in and discount it to total available market. The second factor is religious factor. And I say this, and this does, why this might not affect all industries. When you look at the insurance space, for instance, the US can say to you that they have a 350 million total addressable market for insurance. When I get a deck in Nigeria that shows me that my TAM is 200 million people, I can almost tell you immediately that that's not possible, because at least 65 million of those people, or 100 million of them, are either Muslims or Christians who don't believe in insurance because they believe in other things that cover them. And so therefore, my total addressable market is not 200 million for insurance, it's much lower. And entrepreneurs don't always factor these things into it. And maybe the third one that is a challenge is the PPP challenge. That's the purchasing power parity. The purchasing power in Nigeria, again, when you look at total addressable market, is extremely different from even South Africa, where our GDP per capita is extremely different to each other. GDP per capita in Nigeria is currently less than $3,000. In the US is about $80,000. In Luxembourg is about $180,000. So when I want to sell a product to you in Nigeria, I've got to consider how many people can actually pay for this. And that's why we say that sometimes there's a gap in the market, but there's no market in the gap. And so all of these challenges of culture, of religion, of purchasing power parity is extremely important. The last one, and SEC is sitting here to talk about regulation. Regulation is a major challenge. So as investors, if you're bringing a product in and we know that it's going to be in a highly regulated sector, whether by SEC, whether by CBN, whether by NCC or NICOM, we are more careful because it's regulated. And so those are some of the challenges that we've seen over the years.
Thank you very much, Mr. Oyene. And Mr. Deputy Governor, Mr. Oyene has spoken clearly to a lot of challenges that he feels investors are experiencing: legacy, cultural, religious, purchasing power parity, and even regulation. How is the Lagos State government positioning itself to attract opportunities in that climb for investments?
Thank you very much.
Not yet.
I don't think it's on. Is it on?
Thank you very much. I think there are three issues here. The first one is, what are we doing to enhance our capability in terms of broadband penetration in Nigeria? When Ms. Ola Williams was talking, he said we have 50% broadband penetration. Okay. So when Ms. Ola, the Microsoft country manager, was talking, she mentioned the fact that we have 50% broadband penetration compared to countries in Europe that have 98%. So the best way for us to do that is that we don't intend to solve a problem and create another one. Part of the challenges we have in Lagos is that in the process of telcos and doing their work, they also interfere with our roads by digging roads, by doing truss boring and so on. So that's why Lagos State embarked on the 6,000-kilometer metropolitan fiber network. What that does, it has 6 ducts. What that does for us is, first of all, it allows the state to have ability to penetrate all our own institutions, our hospitals, all our secondary schools, our primary schools. This one is also not working out. Our primary schools, everything. So that our children in primary schools, in secondary schools, our teachers can also have that ability. Okay, so that's the first one. The second part is also what the agency interested that you are heading is also doing. And that's also giving people grants or even loans at single digits that allows them to actually invest in projects, activities of their choice. And the other one is also your agency that trains entrepreneurs. Because in order to have a good company, you must have good personnel. So, and it's important for people to also understand it's okay to write codes, it's okay to start business, but you must know how to keep your accounts. You must know how to keep your records. You must know how to train your staff, and so on and so forth, which are some of the things that Lagos State Employment Trust Fund, which you headed, is also doing. We're also into partnering with various companies, and I think the Microsoft country manager mentioned that the Global Scale Initiative where Nigeria intends to train enormous amount of people. We are partnering with Microsoft to make sure that happens. We are also working with Oracle, for example, on the Oracle startup that allows startup companies to have access to cloud resources. So these are the various initiatives. And of course, again, you have the labor information management system that allows you to understand the interaction between what you are doing, the human resources and everything. So those are part of the initiatives, access and resources that we are giving now to small scale and even the startups so that they can actually do the right thing, have the right information, have access to proper technology.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Governor. I do apologize. Please, if you don't mind, we would like you to speak to how Lagos State is positioning itself so that there's so as to attract more investment as a state. This caller had discussed the issues and the challenges that he feels investors are finding in Africa. But how is Lagos State changing that conversation and making sure that we're ready to take business?
Okay, so that just to repeat what I've said before. So we are looking at that from three perspectives. The first is to actually allow broadband penetration in the state. And I'm sure everybody in this room must have seen the various cable, red, blue, green, and all over the state. So the idea was to build a 6,000 kilometer metropolitan fiber network that will have 6 docks, 5 leads to all the various companies that needs it, and 1 dedicated to Lagos State government for our hospitals, for our secondary schools, our primary schools, and all the various institutions. So that's to increase the penetration of broadband. As you've listened to various people before, Microsoft was telling us about the fact that we have about 50%. Some people say it's even lower, but that we are just judging by Lagos. So, but let's assume it is 50%. So the idea is with that, we can increase it tremendously. So I also mentioned what your agency, the Lagos State Employment Trust Fund, is doing in terms of giving people loans, single digits, helping people to actually also understand business, trying to train people, entrepreneurs, on how to employ the right people, how to run their businesses, and then, of course, giving them access to various information. So we are partnering with Microsoft, for example, on the global scale, where you are training over 5,000 people on how to understand technology to build their initiatives. We are dealing with Oracle startup that allows startup companies to have access to cloud resources so that they can manage their information without actually paying a huge sum of money for it. And then, of course, the labor, I spoke about the labor information management system, that because you cannot build a company without people. And therefore, investing in people, getting the right people is also very important. And I also mentioned the fact that Lagos State is also doing a lot of training and entrepreneur that your agency is helping us to power, so that at least we can have the resources for internet penetration, train the human resources, and get access to what is needed. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Governor. Flowing from that, so you heard it from the Deputy Governor himself. So there's the Lagos State Employment Trust Fund that actually provides access to affordable financing. We act as bridge financing, hoping that small businesses can start, scale up, and then before you move to the investor, we get you investor ready. So that takes me straight to Maya. And Maya is the founder of Ingressive Capital. Maya, based on your experience in Africa, sorry?
I'm coming.
Yeah.
I'm out.
Okay. She's going to tell us, based on her experience, what it has been like playing in this space.
So thank you for the opportunity. And again, Deputy Governor, kudos for the effort that the state of Lagos is making when it comes to investing in startups, when it comes to investing in technology and research and development. It's really important. I'm the CEO and founder of a tech company that actually happens to be in the middle of not only trying to fundraise, but also solving a problem around the regulatory space for innovation specifically. So MTech is a technology company that helps central banks, primarily focusing on central banks in Africa, central banks in the Caribbean. I'm originally from Haiti. And the idea for us to tap into the opportunity that I think we're all discussing today, and the topic around funding Africa and connecting Africa and developing Africa is something that investors are very interested in. I think the numbers are in, based on what was shared this morning, 6 billion being invested across Africa, and over 900 million. I agree with the advisor, the numbers are higher so far this year for Africa. And the idea is there is such a big opportunity when we think about the numbers of Africa representing over 25% of the world's population. The 6 billion that we talk about is 3% of the 220 billion that VC funded and startups so far this year. So for me, I see the big business case to be made that Africa is a big market, and there's an opportunity that investors, local investors and international investors, want to bring in and investing in local companies or companies targeting and creating value and economic growth in Africa. When we look at that, we turn around, and when it comes to either fundraising for us or even talking to regulators and innovators in the space, regulation is a big bottleneck that can also be a catalyst for why investors invest more. How do you go from 3% to maybe 25% of the global investment being done around the world to match if you were to do a proportionate distribution of VC funds compared to the world's population? So that would say from 6 billion to 60 billion, right? So imagine that coming to Africa, and how do you, if you want to have a bigger share, a bigger slice of the pie, how do you get more funding into Africa? And those are conversations that central banks are coming to us and asking us, how can we help with our technology when it comes to lowering the barrier of regulation for innovation and bringing those things together to say, how can we get more direct investment into the continent through private sector to public sector engagement, but also providing a regulatory environment that investors feel comfortable coming in. And the fintechs are ready, the market is ready. And I think the demand is there, the need is there. So that's the work that we're doing, but that's our contribution to the space.
Thank you very much. I just wanted I'm coming right back to you, Mr. Regina, Mr. Karawusa, but before that, I would like Mr. Chengwen to speak to his experience coming into the market, because Opera has been here now not too long. How many years in the market? What has been that experience? She speaks to regulatory environment. What was it like for you to get into the market and to be able to play?
So yeah, based on Opera's information and also the experience we get from China as in an underdeveloped country, as we saw, we have a few different good opportunities. As the first one, as the construction and for the infrastructure, and we have opportunities. And the second one, and I think it's internet. Internet in last 2 decades in China, we bloom a lot of famous companies. And in China, we have Alibaba, we have Tencent, and in the US, you have the Facebook, Google, and it's in last 30 years, internet grows a lot. And the third one, I think, is the finance. And finance, you have the insurance, stock, and some other things. And this is all times for other countries. People also, they grow step by step. The first, they develop the construction. Then they have some of the basic things that develop the internet. And after the internet is good, they have some more finance report to speed the cycle of the whole economy. But for now, the time changed in Nigeria, so we have a better opportunity. I think for now, because I already traveled around the world, I was working and studying in US and China, and I found that for now, Nigeria already attracts all around the world's eyesight in here, no matter the capital or people. People are paying more attention to Nigeria because Nigeria have a lot of population. And so I think that, so this is the time to combine different periods together. So for now, you see, even some though our construction is not very stable, the internet is still growing, but we already have the internet, we have payments, we have MMO, and we have some fintech things. I think it's time to mix different verticals together to find some interesting marketing opportunities.
Thank you very much. Mr. Karawusa, you've heard from Opera, and they speak that people are looking at Nigeria because of the population. What you will find in developed world, in the Western world, is there's the ability to crowdfund for your business. So you open it up to anybody that is interested in putting money. So like having to go and pitch and present to 20 or 101 investor. You just open it up on a platform and give up people that opportunity to crowdfund. And as the Security Exchange Commission, what is being put in place to allow Nigerian businesses crowdfund today? And I'm not talking about IPOs. We're just talking about the ability for young people who don't have deep pockets to put money in a business they believe in.
Thank you. I think I'll start by appreciating the organizers for extending the invitation to me. And I'll also say that the primary responsibility of the SEC, apart from being a regulator, is an entity that is saddled with the responsibility of developing a capital market that will contribute to the economic growth of the country. So our developmental role is bigger than even our regulatory role. So it's a function that we take very seriously. Coming to the question of the crowdfunding. In January this year, we launched the regulation for crowdfunding. And this regulation is targeted at helping micro, small, and medium enterprises to raise funds from the public. So the kind of enterprises that can access this market are, startups, not for the big companies, the listed companies. So a micro enterprise can raise up to 50 million, a small 70, and then a medium scale enterprise can raise 100 million naira. And depends on the kind of instruments that is going to be issued by those seeking funding. If it's going to be debt, then the number of people who can subscribe is, there's no problem with that. But if the enterprise is to issue equity in raising the funds, then it cannot go beyond 50 because it would then transform to a public company. But there's a provision in the rule that if in the course of soliciting investments, it happens that you cross 50, then you become a public company by default, in which case you'll be required to register those securities because the threshold of public company has kicked in. So these are the regulations that we put in place, and they've actually come into effect.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Caruso. So small businesses are very dear to us at LSCTF. They are like, we feel they're the lifebone. They really make the economy grow. And if we get it right, we actually can do a lot with these MSMEs. Thank you. We're happy to know that there's some regulation plan going around crowdfunding for businesses. But that takes me back to Mr. Deputy Governor. So apart from what we do today, which is where we give micro loans, we give maximum of up to 5 million to individual businesses to to do their business. What are other structures you believe government can come in investing in businesses such that they give investors some level of comfort as well? From your angle, what do you think additional things that we can be doing that can actually help that and give these co-investors on this panel with you some comfort?
Hello? Yes,
Yeah.
I think the biggest thing for government to do really is to make it easy for private sector to try. And so we're raising grants. How many people in terms of quantum can you actually do that for? Okay. And basically, money follow good ideas. That's the standard everywhere in the world. So I think for us, the biggest challenge is how do we train, especially our youths? It's training on how to do, how to conceptualize ideas and how to support them in terms of getting it to market. So for example, I think the Honorable Minister was talking about the startup bill. So I think Lagos State, we are actually part of that. And what that does is that it reduces the gestation period for businesses to get to market. So those are the type of things you can do in terms of how do we even, so because basically it's very difficult for small businesses to go to banks, really. I mean, at 22%, you can't just survive. So what do we need to do to make sure that small businesses, like he just mentioned, the processes for crowdfunding and the rest, but so what we need to do better also is how do we bring in high network people to actually invest locally? Like I was saying, I mean, the furniture company in Ikorodu, it was amazing what they did. I mean, they supplied the furniture in my office. That's how I knew them. And it was really very nice, really very nice. And so people seeing it, people can come in and say, well, bring in 1 million, 2 million, and they were able to raise about 28 million naira. So, I mean, if they are able to now invest it, which is the key here, the ability to now make sure that you sustain the business so that, you don't now spend the money on something else. So, and I think that's where we need to come in with the training. Like I said, how do you even keep accounts of your company? How do you make sure that when the taxman comes, you are able to show your documentation and everything? So and I know that a lot of people also complain about, or these documentation, but the reality is that as nice as all these people are on this platform, if I know you, whatever, you cannot travel anywhere without a passport. So I can say, oh, well, I know her, she's from this family. Well, it doesn't matter. You must still have a passport to travel anywhere. The same thing with businesses. Your documentation must still be intact. So a lot of people have assets that cannot be collateralized because the documentation is not. So part of what we are doing is automating our documentation process so that people can get their title, people can get things faster. I think the government mentioned that in terms of automating and encouraging people not to deal with touts. That's one of the things that we simple. So those are part of the things that we need to do in terms of access.
Very correct. Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Governor. I think I would like all the panelists to actually respond to this particular question around funding, because Mr. Deputy Governor has now told us about different structures the government is actually using to improve the ease of doing business. So starting with Mr. Oyenei, can you please discuss what kind of models do you think, what kind of funding structure can actually help improve how we bring in high net worth individuals into the bracket, local investors into this bucket so that there's more funding for local startups to access?
Thanks, Teju. So I like to generally use this sort of platform to try and try and humbly put some ideas on the table. And that way we can get for maybe just conversations or even challenges, because in the challenges that we identify as investors, they are not our challenges. They are typically the startups or the tech companies' challenges, but they hinder funding, because it's very hard to cut checks for a startup that we potentially know that, yes, you're forecasting a total addressable market of 3 million people, but we know that maybe at most you're going to hit 300,000 people. And so inherently, the challenges are usually on that side, but our own side, the biggest one is possibly, like I said earlier on, is possibly regulation. And so in terms of model, and this is where wearing multiple hats as investors in Nigeria is very important. And so we play in we run a private equity firm that also does VC. So on the private equity side, we're able to fund large projects that can run into possibly millions of dollars. But then on the VC side, we cut as low as $10,000 check for pre-seed to seed stage to maybe $100,000 to Series A to $500,000. So now, and I feel that this is one model that a lot of funders and investors need to start to look at, where you are not necessarily waiting for the later rounds before you come in. A lot of the startups that we see need as low as, when you look at pre-seed, as low as $250,000, $500,000 to have some kind of 6 to 12 months runway. But a lot of people are waiting to cut the 100,000 checks to see whether the concept is already proven. So the first model is, can you actually build your internal structure as funders to really be able to fund earlier rounds? So even if it means that you are funding them as individuals, which is what you call angel investing, that's extremely important. And I think another part of it is also, there are also entrepreneurs here who, for instance, are not looking for equity funds. Debt is what they prefer. And yes, globally, equity seems to be the only conversations that people tend to have, but I've seen that in Nigeria a lot of time when you look at maybe non-core tech businesses that are tech enabled, a lot of times debt could be suitable for them. 24 months, 36 month debt structure that will be priced at a lower rate than what a typical bank or a typical capital platform will price. That's another model. And I think that for us, if that comes with some kind of, so a bank would typically ask for collateral, but with some kind of guarantee on that, whether tied to cash flow, debt structure would also be very important. A combination of convertibles are also very important. So debt, equity combination. So where I'm giving you 10 million, let me use 10 million naira or $100,000, and I'm doing it at a 70-30 combination, 70 for equity and 30 for debt, or vice versa. Or I'm doing a convertible note. So that's another structure where, yes, it's debt, but it's potentially, it could be converted to equity at some point. Now, because my background, obviously, as you know, Teju, from running a tech hub or a business hub, we've had cases where the model has been space for equity, where the businesses that you hear of today who are now raising millions of dollars couldn't raise $100,000 to pay for office space. And what we've had to do is really provide them the office space in return for equity for a year, for 2 years. And now when they raise their first or second round, they're then able to raise larger rounds. So there are many models that I think we can all try as investors. But I think ultimately, Lagos State, and I'm glad that Your Excellency, Dr. Hamza is on this platform. Lagos State is possibly the safest, and I say this with all due respect to other states, and not because I'm in Lagos, and not because we operate from Lagos, we operate from Nigeria. But in terms of being able to, what you will call, a friend of mine calls a safe environment to be able to experiment, Lagos State presents that opportunity. And one of the things I want to put on the table here for Tumboso and all the organizers, let's take this out of this place. For instance, let's have an uncomfortable conversation for funding. If I want to cut a check for a crypto company today, yes, uncomfortable conversation, because otherwise we're just going to be going round and round and not really have this real conversation. SEC is sitting here. I wish CBN was sitting here so that we can have this conversation. Can we, for instance, because in another part of the world, as we see here today, the second largest crypto company is sitting on their stock exchange today. In the US, Coinbase. And in Nigeria, a crypto founder cannot publicly say, I run a crypto company and is looking for a check from me. How am I supposed to fund that company? Do you understand? And this is, we know this, that the future of payments is not even fintech. The future of payment in Nigeria is in two ways. One is street tech, agent banking on the road. So fintech is done and is going to be huge and will continue to be successful. But agent banking, and the second part of financial inclusion, I dare say, well, in Naira might be one of it, but I tell you, digital currency is going to be. And by the way, while we're trying to figure out whether we are banning crypto or we are letting it go, do we now know that there's a new world called metaverse, which is now like a completely new world of virtual reality? And I think that those are conversations. So as a funder, I'm seeing decks in front of me of young people who are building incredibly powerful products in this space, but we can't fund them because the market is even limited. They can't publicly do transactions. They don't have, the banks still can't support them even though they want to because of regulations. So those are really the difficult ones. Your Excellency, if you can't do it within the state, you have free trade zone. The idea of free trade zone is to allow for experiments. You know, so let's use this platform to put big agendas on the table. Why do I need to go all the way to Delaware to structure entities that would allow for us to be able to do investment in some of these structures? There is like a free trade zone there. There's mixed up building. So those are the things that I want to ensure that, because we're in a technology conference, so let's not have the really soft conversation.
Very valid, very valid points, Mr. Elaine. And we do have a free trade zone as a government, and I think there's a lot we can do with that with experimentation. I listened to the MD of Meristem say yesterday that even as an entrepreneur, you should not let the regulator give you set boundaries for you. You have to be able to evaluate those policies and those laws and find where those gaps are. And they've been able to do that, even with SEC in Nigeria as Meristem. But it was very interesting to listen to that. So as an entrepreneur, you need to study the regulations. You need to find where the gaps are. You need to find what you can push. So I would ask that same question to Camilla. Kola has talked a lot about different structures which we can use. Most importantly, I think he mentions the fact that there needs to be opportunity to experiment. People need to be comfortable with, because technology is evolving fast.
That's right. So maybe I'll give an alternative to the free trade zone. Instead, what we do see as an opportunity, and the pain that is being shared here is real, right? We're seeing fintechs, we're seeing companies that could raise millions of dollars, but investors are asking for regulatory clarity. That is something that I experienced myself, although I'm not we're not a regulated entity, we're a technology company, not financial service provider. But the fact that we focus on Africa, investors want to know, is there a market here? Can you really thrive in this environment? Eventually, we turned to and got very lucky and got funded by Nigerian investors, and very proud of that, because understanding the market and understanding how to enter and understanding how to allocate capital to solve challenges is what is the really good balance, right? But the use of funds is something that we think is interesting for us, because we do that in two ways. And when it comes to contributing to the local market, one is building a product that not only makes us successful as a company, but that also solves a challenge. And regulatory sandboxes are things that we're looking at right now. And more countries are looking at them, not to be policies as they've been so far, but injecting technology into that collaboration, into that innovation, into that discovery phase is something that we are helping regulators understand how they can use technology on their side to better understand the market. You know, crypto solves a lot of problems, but it also brings a lot of risks.
Yeah.
And I think introducing it in the market requires risk management, risk mitigation, understanding what you can and can't do. And there are a lot of consumer protection concerns, right? There are people that I know in Nigeria who have lost money in crypto because sometimes it's not user-friendly. It's really difficult to understand and balance, and but it's very easy to make payments with. So we do understand the balance. And what central banks and regulators are talking about right now is how do you enable and take the good and leave the bad in a way, right? That's the question here. And how do you get the balance? And for us, we think actually technology can help do that. Because if you don't have access to data to help you understand what is a fraudulent activity versus what is not, you might want to stop every transaction and say, let me investigate and find out what's wrong. Instead, how can we use data to inform not only government, but the citizenry, but also the regulators for them to be more informed? And regulatory sandboxes, we think, is one tool that can be applied.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you have questions, you're going to just start get your questions ready. He's going to go around with a microphone on those to take questions from the audience. It's a conversation. So I would just then ask Mr. His name is Mr. Karawusa to respond to that question around crypto. And I think Kamela has actually spoken to the fact that yes, there is risk involved with crypto, but what a security exchange, what do you think as a regulator, what should your posture be on this crypto conversation, blockchain crypto conversation?
Thank you so much. The SEC had put up a statement last year on its position concerning virtual assets. That statement has not changed. The position is not changed. We've said that virtual financial assets of certain sort are securities. But you then have the central bank having its own position, and being the regulator of that space and knowing the kind of issues that they have with cryptocurrencies. We have to respect the position of the central bank. They know, the problems that they see with cryptos. So it's an engagement that stakeholders must continually have until we get to the point that we're on the same page. So the SEC has its position and the CBN has its own position.
Okay. Thank you very much. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you have a question, so we're going to take, depending on how much time we have, okay, we will take 2 questions very quickly, and the microphone, he's going to the back. No, sorry. Yeah. So there's somebody right there. His hand was up. In front. In the black shirt. Do you want to go ahead? The guy in the black shirt. Thank you. Yes.
Very well. We've been speaking. Firstly, I would like to thank everyone in the panel. It's been really wonderful hearing from you. So here's my question. We made mention of the Nigeria Startup Bill, and I can remember in 2020, Nigeria amended the BOFIA, basically Bank and Other Financial Institution Act, to actually cover fintech. So I actually feel the Company and Allied Matters Act basically has covered whatever we'll be doing with the Nigeria Startup Bill. So I feel doing the Nigeria Startup Bill may necessarily not be needed, since startups are also companies. So why are we doing a special regulations for startups, since there is a Company and Allied Matters Act already? Why is there a need for the Nigeria Startup Bill?
Okay, thank you for that question. Does any of the panelists want to take that? Because the CAMA that was amended in 2020 already addresses the issue where the startup bill wants to address. Do you want to answer that, sir?
I don't know who wants to answer. Well, I mean, my understanding of the startup bill is actually to, oh, you want to answer it? Okay, go ahead.
So we have the essay, Innovate Tech and Innovation, Lagos State.
Okay, so I can take a stab at that question. I've been part of some of the rounding activities of the startup bill. And so what it does, in similarity to the Tunisian startup bill, Senegalese, is the classification of what a startup is, disparate from, say, an SME, right? There are certain classifications, for instance, companies, for instance, that have a culture of continuous experimentation, right? Companies that invest in R&D. How do you get more technology-enabled businesses to grow much faster, to provide jobs, as opposed to other kinds of companies that might not necessarily scale as quick or as much? And that is what the startup bill is trying to unleash. As you know, if you compare, say, an ExxonMobil, right, to a Meta, or, you know, a legacy company to Google, the growth trajectory of those companies are completely different, right? The new kinds of economic pathways that those companies have created, Facebook, Meta, and all of that, new kinds of skills, right, that have actually affected every part of society, probably the way maybe a food company didn't. And so the startup bill is looking at that particular classification to try and turbocharge those kinds of companies. And so the classification, if you look at the startup bill, is very, very succinct. It's very particular about the kinds of companies it wants to help accelerate, right? And those, for companies that are do not fit that classification, the Company and Allied Matters Act does take care of them as well. So it's a win-win. There's no lose-lose in that particular scenario. So I hope that answers that.
Thank you very much, S.A. We'll take one last question. Just because I'm a woman, if there's a woman that has a question, please stand up. Yes, that's the last question. Gender equality.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Jennifer. I'm an entrepreneur. I own the art management. But I have one question. And my question has to do with data in Nigeria, or let's bring it down to Lagos State. I do some research sometimes, and I think we don't have enough data, or there's lack of data, or nobody is accumulating data, or I don't know, my problem is data. So I'm here to ask, since we have everybody that has to do with this same industry, what's happening about data? And data analytics as a subject is like really, really far behind. Okay. I can't even get a specific data or information on anything, actually.
Thank you for that question. I'll let Mr. Deputy Governor. Lagos State is doing a lot in data.
Well, I think I will let Tubos also talk about. The reality is we have enormous amount of data. So the question is in what format? You understand? And that's what majority of states, government, even private sector are trying to digitize the data. So it's not that data is not available. It is. But in what format? I mean, you can have it in one Excel somewhere. You can have it in a silo in one agency and so on and so forth. So what most state governments are doing, at least certainly what Lagos State government is doing, is to have a silo So for example, when the SA Innovation was talking in the morning, he spoke about when we started Oracle. That was like 15 years ago or 18 years ago. Then remember at that time, even companies, private companies were trying to do it. The reality is at that time, Nike, which is that company that manufactures all those sneakers that we are all wearing, started Oracle, canceled it after spending $17 million. It didn't work. So but the essence of using it at the time was to coagulate all their data. So for example, in Lagos State, that we have a database that is called Oracle. All our financial data is in a single database. Therefore, we can track from various ministries who is buying this, who bought that. We have inventory. We have depending on the institution where you work or where you are trying to get information. So we are doing, for example, EGIS, that ultimately, so you fly and you get a data meta of all the buildings, for example, in Lagos. But the reality is things do change. So buildings will change. So you must fly again in 5 years. But that data is somewhere. So it depends on what you are looking for. So what is important is how do we aggregate this data so that it's not in different silos? And that's what government is doing. So I don't know if you want to also say something about it.
Thank you very much, sir. So what Lagos State is doing now is, first of all, coming up with a data management framework, right? As to, in terms of the data process of capturing, digitizing, right? Correcting, making sure that that data is accurate, and then presenting it before stakeholders. So for instance, within Lagos State, people have access to certain data, but I'm sure that woman's question dealt with how can she get access to data, probably to run her business and things like that. And as I mentioned in the morning, part of what we are doing in the Open Government Project is trying to aggregate this data, get it from all the silos, digitize them, and make them available to you. I'll give you an example. The EGIS project that the Deputy Governor was talking about. When we started working on that project, we saw a number of land titles, right? And land titles from the 1870s, right? So since when the British were here, in fact, they signed those things in cursive, right? So it's tons of data. So first of all, you have to scan, digitize them, right? Make sure they are accurate. Some you might have to reproduce. So when you scan all of that, put it in a repository, right? And then make it part of this EGIS system. What you are now able to have is that you are buying a piece of land, or maybe that piece of land is under some kind of acquisition. If you are able to have data to that piece of land since, need I say, antiquity, you are much more able to value that land, right? In terms of land disputes, because of accurate records now, you are much more able, to administer issues on that land. So there's a lot of that data aggregation that is going on now, and in phases is going to be available because it is a lot. We are talking about records since the 18, and of course, the developed countries had a head start, but we are also on that process as well. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Estee. At this time, I want to say a big thank you to all the members of the panel for your time.
4 minutes. I'm just kidding.
We want to say big thank you. Want to say something? We want to say a big thank you.
So concerning points on regulating cryptocurrencies, we must understand that the central bank has enormous responsibility. And it is not a light matter when they take a position that they take. So I'd like to make that point. If at the moment they see some issues with cryptocurrencies, it's something that we have to respect their position until such a time that that position shifts. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. And that is it for this panel. On behalf of AOT 3.0, I want to say a big thank you to all the panelists for making our time, for sharing their thoughts and their experiences with us today. from Tubos Nalaki. Thank you, Camilla. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Governor, Mr. Karawusu, Mr. Chengwen, and Mr. Koloyene. Thank you, and God bless.
Thank you.